We back, baby. Sorry that the show's running a little bit late. We and Dan had to decide how we were going to do the show. College football has taken over our lives. So before you all start complaining about how the show's late and how this is the first one of the season, just be happy you even have a show because we have teams to run and I have 4-star recruits to get because I can't land a fucking 5-star recruit to save my life, as Dan is so happily pointing out. Daniel Metzger, how are you doing this evening, my friend?
Doing great. I have more 5 stars I know what to do with. If only I could get like 5-star fantasy players, I'd be a lot happier.
Yeah. What's funny is you're so much better than me at college. I should probably latch back onto fantasy because maybe I have a chance because this college thing is not going well for me right now.
I wouldn't say it's not going well.
Well, in the All-American one that we're doing with everybody, I'm the only national champ. So in that universe, I'm a happy guy. In our other universe, I'm a sad panda. But this is not the college football show. This is the Massillon Football League show. I will not be calling it the Taylor Cruz Football League show on this show. All right, guys, you know what it is.
Story real quick before you get this, because you said Taylor. As I'm going through my stuff for this show and putting my list of players and their teams, I was like, man, I only got 13 teams on here. Who did I leave out? I completely left Taylor out of my list. Like he didn't even exist.
Jesus.
Even when I'm sitting there trying to think, like I had to go look and see what team I had off because I
just love that he's probably the only one in the chat right now. Actually, I can see when people join. Someone just joined. I'm going to assume it's Taylor. It's not Taylor. It's Lee. How are you doing, my friend? Taylor said he was the first here 20 minutes ago, but then left before the show actually started, off being a father or whatever. Well, Lee, you got here right at the beginning of the show. So we're about to talk about the dumpster fires. So, Dan, you and I were kind of breaking down at the beginning of the show that we have 3 teams in common. Taylor is here. It just doesn't show him in my chat for some reason. So we have 3 teams in common that we kind of put towards the bottom. And I think let's address 2 of these teams right from the start. So first of all, there's Greg. All love, but what the hell was that draft? You don't need to leave the draft with 2 or 3 of everything. That's not a sound draft strategy, Dan.
I mean, I was doing another draft today, and I was literally talking about. I just got done with the draft, guys, where someone took 2 kickers in the 7th and 8th round because someone else in that draft took one in like the 10th round. Everybody was laughing. I was like, so it could always be worth.
Yeah.
As I was prepping for the show, I realized
2 kickers, 3 tight ends, 4 IDP, if I saw that correctly, because he cut 3 of them. So
yeah, I wrote down the IDPs thing. I was like, I didn't understand what was happening, but
and then there's no nice way for me to put this. This is my first roommate, arguably one of my first best friends, the guy who lost the championship last year, Steve Horvath, trades away Bijan Robinson and leaves himself outside of wide receiver with an absolute dumpster fire of a team. Do you remember, Dan, 2 years ago where we had the bet every week where I would give you the over-under on how many points Brian Maguire's running backs would score? Because we're going to be playing that same fucking game this season with Steve Horvath's running backs, unless he pulls something off with all those picks he just got, because
what I don't understand is, remember that year of suffering he went through to get Robinson,
and now he's going to go through another year of suffering.
Well, the worst part is he had them all last year when he wasn't like utilized the right way,
and now it should be the right way.
He should be utilized the right way this year. Should be a star player, and you trade him away. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So let me quickly run down Horvath's team because I was shocked. I'm going to be perfectly honest when I was throwing this team together. So I broke everybody down by position. So right now, Horvath's starting quarterback is Bo Nix. Easily the worst starting quarterback in our league. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Bo Nix. Maybe he's Drew Brees and I'm wrong. I don't see it. Right now, his starting running backs are Audric Estime and Kamani Vidal. Both of those guys were roster bubbles 2 weeks ago. Now, obviously, they made their teams, and maybe they're going to be these rookie sensations. I don't see it. Obviously, best wide receivers in the league. Nobody comes close to him at wide receiver. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. But then another rookie, Ben Sinnott. Another rookie, Xavier Worthy. I tried to list how many feasible bench players people have. I gave him a 0 on bench players. So Horvath finishes bottom of the league for me. I was actually pleasantly surprised at how much I like Greg's starting lineup. He cannot take an injury, but let me break down his lineup just really quickly for Lee and the people who aren't in the league. I have Jordan Love as his starting quarterback because he kept Brock Purdy, but then drafted Jordan Love. David Montgomery and Austin Eckler, Deebo Samuel, Chris Godwin, Evan Ingram at tight end, Jordan Addison, and then maybe one other bench player. And he actually didn't do bad with kicker and defense, which I guess is to be expected when you draft multiple. Detroit, Max Crosby, Justin Tucker. He finished more middle of the pack for me, Dan. But then we talked about the other teams we have at the bottom, and we had one other person in common, and that is Kenny Edelman, who obviously gave up his entire draft to go get Jamar Chase from Taylor. Well, what were your thoughts when breaking down Kenny's team?
If everything breaks right for Kenny, his best case scenario is 500.
I can see that. So I ranked you guys all by position, and then I took like the averages and I kind of figured out what I thought that would mean win wise. Based solely on the back of his wide receivers, I have Horvath winning 2 games. I got to be honest, Dan, I have the rest of us really tightly packed. So I don't hate Kenny as much as you do. I'm projecting him for 5 to 6 wins. So you're saying his best case is 500. I think we could maybe see a little bit better. He needs everybody to stay healthy. Outside of tight end with Noah Fant, he has good starters at the positions that matter if they stay healthy. Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Javonte Williams, obviously Jamar Chase, Drake London. And then if DeAndre Hopkins, right now he's not been ruled out for week 1. So that could be interesting there. But it's just, there's a large health issue. And then there's the Noah Fant issue.
Well, he has no bench. Hollywood Brown here's the thing. I'm sure every Kansas City receiver is going to have at least 1 or 2 good games throughout the year. But the rest of those weeks could be hot garbage. Javonte Williams is a big question mark. And I'll be honest with you, Richardson, now I'm saying this as someone who I need Richardson to do well. I have Michael Pittman on my team. I need him to be good. I'm not convinced on him.
Nor I. I've spent an entire offseason on every show that I go on trash talking Anthony Richardson, mainly because we saw him play in 4 games and finish 2. So I don't love that.
There's that aspect of things, but if you look at any like sports writers have talked about how he's looked at practice or in those
50-50 at best.
Those team practices where they're basically a scrimmage, they have said he's looked awful.
Yeah.
I mean, I followed a lot of the Bengals stuff. I know he threw like 3 or 4 picks in that Bengals one that they did with him. Like, it's just, he has looked like hot garbage. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he does great because I have Michael Pittman. I need Michael Pittman to do big things.
And then I think the last person we need to talk about in this tier, and he's already going to be mad when I call him this tier, but I want you to know that immediately when I put you in this tier, Dan reminded me of how stupid we looked last year when we had you in this tier and said for that reason alone, he couldn't do it. Darren shakes out as one of my worst teams post-draft, and it could be because I don't trust Tua Tagovailoa. It could be because I don't trust DeAndre Swift. It could be because I don't trust Christian Watson. It's certainly because I don't love Cole Kmet. Darren has a team of players that I just don't particularly care for. And then I think one other thing that we haven't talked about with the change in the rivalry system where we just let sleeper decide our rivals, Darren has 2 games against Taylor this season, which I think hurts him as well.
Yeah, I'm right there. With Darren's team, it's a lot of question marks. It's Tyreek and a lot of question marks. That should be his new team name. But like Ryan was saying, I wouldn't put you in that bottom tier, Darren, because we did that to you last year, and I was dead wrong. You did outstanding. You know, I respect your fantasy knowledge enough that I wouldn't put you in that tier this year. Now, if you have a terrible year this year, maybe next year I'll put you there. But right now, I'm not going to put you there, Darren. I have you in the mid tier with everybody else. When I looked at wins, if everything goes right, he could sneak into the bottom of the playoffs. But I agree with that. I don't love his team either. But
this is where it gets weird for me, Dan, because me calling Darren a bad team is so weird because this is how tightly grouped I have everybody. I have Horvath at 2 wins. I have my leader, who I'll get to at the end of the show, did I give him 11 when it was all said and done? I have my leader at 11 wins. I have everybody else in the league at 8, 7, and 6. So to me, everybody is in playoff contention. This is, I think, one of our more tightly packed seasons. So me saying Darren scored poorly for me, he did, and it's a trust issue for me as an analyst. But I agree with you. He could easily, with the right management and the management we saw from him last year, he could easily be in. largest mistake for this team, 1,000 million trillion %. Jalen Hurts was a part of his great management last year, and I'm not on board with removing Jalen Hurts and drafting Tua Tagovailoa. I just think that was a mistake, putting it bluntly.
If he would have getting rid of Hurts and he thinks he can make his team better, that's fine. I think there were better quarterbacks available when he drafted Tua.
I mean, he's a Dolphins fan, so I don't think that came into his mind. But he kept Swift, if I'm correct. So I think you get rid of Swift, you keep Hurts, K9, and Tyreek Hill, and then draft a running back with that 9th pick. And the world's his oyster at that point. He, like I said, Darren just shook out with players I don't trust, plain and simple. Now, you mentioned the middle tier, which is where you have Darren. My middle tier is 3 teams long, and you happen to agree with me on these 3 teams. It's Stevie, Terry, and Phil. I think it's only right that I let you start by talking about Phil.
I think this is one of Phil's better teams he's built. I know he had a great year the other year. I didn't love it then. I think I wrote down about Phil's team is he has no tight end and he has no depth. I think he'll start off the year better than how he's going to finish. His lack of depth at running back, I think, is really going to hurt him, especially once Nick Chubb comes back and he can no longer really depend on Jerome Ford to be productive. Yeah. Receivers are really good. Having Moore, Diggs, Ayuk.
Ayuk getting that contract.
What's that?
Ayuk getting that contract saved him. So.
But, I mean, he has nothing on his bench that holds.
I have to go look because I listed his bench. Well, I listed his flex as Diggs, and then I gave him credit for 1 bench player, but I didn't write the bench player's name down.
So he has Hubbard, Herbert, Leggett, Gabe Davis, and Dallas Goedert.
I gave him credit for Chuba Hubbard for these first 4 weeks of the season. So yeah, his bench is rough. You're absolutely right.
So that's just, I mean, Josh Jacobs is nice, but I just don't think it's enough. That's why I'm in that middle tier. I think he'll upset some teams at times, but I think he'll lose some games he probably should have won and be right there. I don't have him as a playoff team for me, but I have him in that group that will be competing up until the end of the year.
One thing going in his favor, I think, is that his rival is Horvath, and we've already talked about that. So,
I topped him up for 2 wins right away on that one.
I'll throw in Terry's team because this isn't just the quintessential Terry Wagner team. I don't know what is at this point. Josh Allen at quarterback, which is this Terry's first elite quarterback? Because once he got his hands on Justin Herbert, he kind of ruined Justin Herbert. So Terry's first elite quarterback. And then Henry and Mixon. The only way this could be more Terry is if Mixon was Austin Eckler. But these guys, these are the types of guys that are always on Terry's team. I don't love his wide receivers at Zay and Jamison Williams, but George Kittle, obviously a Terry pick. I did like Terry's bench. He's one of the few people where he has Khalil Shakir at the flex. And that's a guy I like coming out of Buffalo. And then who else did I give him credit for? Oh, I like Antonio Gibson as the backup there in New England. And then I like Ezekiel Elliott, though I'm starting to hear less things to like about Ezekiel Elliott. So I might take credit away from Terry there. But again, I want to be perfectly clear. I have everybody in the running for a playoff spot. Terry is not in my playoffs. But as long as he doesn't ruin Josh Allen, Josh Allen alone could help him there. It's not great that his rival is Mott's. So Mott's is another middle of the pack team for me. But those two could just cancel each other out 1 win each. I do like Terry's defense. Let me throw that out before we move on. Dallas's defense, Roquan Smith and Daniel Carlson. I feel like he did well on defense and special teams there. And then anything to throw in on Stevie's team? The biggest question mark on Stevie's team, I think, is this Caleb Williams pick.
Yeah, quarterback, I think, is an issue for him. And CJ Stroud was absolutely phenomenal last year as a rookie quarterback.
Yeah.
You know what he ranked?
Was he QB in standard leagues? I think QB 10, QB 8, something like that.
I think I saw it written down. I wrote down as QB 11.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard for Williams to be as good as Stroud. So if you're counting on a mid-tier quarterback to run your team, I don't have a lot of faith in that. I think he'll have some big games, but I think he's going to have some eggs as well. Zach Moss in a 50-50 split with Chase Brown, you don't love. I mean, I think he'll have some big games, but I don't think he's somebody you can count on consistently. And I mean, I have Chase Brown. I'm not counting on him consistently to have big games. I don't love it, but he was available, and it's what I have. So
yeah, I think Stevie needs Devontae Adams to be old Devontae Adams, and then just for record's sake, CJ Stroud did in our league finish as QB8.
So. Okay, I don't trust Devontae Adams at all.
And that's where I stand. This Luke Getsy offense has gotten terrible reviews throughout the preseason, and apparently neither quarterback is running it particularly well.
He has more depth on his bench than other people do. I like his he has some room there if some things go wrong. But I just don't. I think again, I'm in that middle tier. I don't expect him to be in the playoffs, but it's within the realm of possibilities for him.
All right, let's talk about our playoff teams. So I feel like 3 of these teams need to be bunched together, and that is me, you, and Mott's, because you have me getting in. I have you getting in. I also have me getting in because I'm an egomaniac, but I have Mott's not getting in. So we'll talk about each other's teams, but let's start by just talking about Mott's. You mentioned CJ Stroud, and I kind of want to start with him. QB8 last year gets Stephon Diggs. Is CJ Stroud going to be our next elite quarterback? What are your thoughts on him? There was a lot of hubbub at the draft at CJ Stroud over Jalen Hurts. And for fantasy purposes, I also would not have made that decision.
I think for Rob's looking at trying to build something that's going to be consistently good for a long time. I see why you went with the younger quarterback and Stroud. Not that Hurts is old or anything like that, but I love Stroud. I think that was a good pick. I love Mott's whole team. I have him not a playoff bubble team like you. I have him in my top 3 competing for a championship.
Oh, I forgot about that. You said you had an elite top 3 and you had Mott's there, whereas I have him out of the playoffs. So that's our big disagreement right there.
I mean, I think that if Stroud is as good as I think he is, or anywhere close to it, Nico Collins is going to have a good year as well. I know there's
I did not give him credit on that stack when I was building this. Now it's a triple stack because he also has Dalton Schultz, I just noticed as well.
He also has Tank Dell. He's really counting on Houston.
Oh, he's Houstoned out.
But he has a ton of depth on his bench if things go wrong.
Devonta Smith as a flex is filthy.
So Dalton Schultz, DK Metcalf, Travis Etienne, Aaron Jones. I mean, this is a solid. He doesn't have the superstars that other teams have, but he is solid all the way through. He has depth if there's any injuries. He has depth for bye weeks. You're not going to catch him on a bad bye week because he has so much depth on his team that's not really going to hurt him all that much. I love Rob's team. I think he did an outstanding job. I think he's in the top 3 where it's championship or bust.
Pulled one of my favorite things, the Pittsburgh TJ Watt stack on the defense IDP as well. I think that was a great move for him.
Sounds like you really like his team for a non-playoff team.
I do. I guess I've been staring at his team and your team for the last 48 hours since I made my little show sheet here. So I'll talk about your team now. I like Joe Burrow. I think this is a year where he's finally coming in at fully 100%, and he's coming in with a fully 100% line. He's going to have like his full complement of people around him. The running back situation for you and for the Bengals scares me a bit, but if the Bengals don't run the ball well with these kind of like jag running backs, I think that's going to play really well for Joe Burrow. And then your wide receivers are obviously Puka Nacua and whoever else you throw out there. Keenan Allen, it's so hard for me right now. Keenan Allen falls into like my 30s. Perfect for your flex spot. Don't get me wrong. But like for me to not quote unquote like Keenan Allen is such a weird thing for me. So I have you and Rob so very close to one another, but I gave you the edge. And it's funny because you're raving about Rob's bench. It's actually your bench that caused me to kind of give you the edge here, because I just see a lot of guys on your bench. Jaleel McLaughlin's a guy who I think could step in for Denver and do very, very well. I just noticed you changed your starting running back. So, no, you just don't have anyone in there right now. Never mind. So Jaleel McLaughlin's a guy. I love Romeo Dobbs. And then obviously it's going to be you. I think you're going to have Chase Brown in at running back. So Luke McCaffrey is an interesting one. I think you have a little bit, in my opinion, better bench than Rob. The one thing Rob might have you on is the flex spot, Keenan Allen versus Devonta Smith, and those are the starters. But where I think the edge is for you is the Kyle Pitts pick. Kyle Pitts with Kirk Cousins as a legit quarterback. I think Dalton Schultz is the one who's going to suffer in Houston with these wide receivers. So your edge at tight end is what gave you the edge into my playoffs.
Yeah, they had Nick Chubb in my starting lineup, and I put him on IR.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it was. That's right. Yeah, I did something similar with Jonathan Brooks. So
if Nick Chubb comes back and does Nick Chubb things, I definitely will improve my thoughts on my team at that point. But I can't just assume that that's going to happen.
Yeah, folks. So if you didn't catch it, Dan does not have himself in the playoffs. He gave me the 6th spot. So Dan, I'll let you talk a little bit about my team.
I mean, I feel like it's the same song and dance every year for your team. You have 3 studs. You draft well, but your question marks are always at receiver. I think Calvin Ridley was an absolute steal. He was literally in my queue. He was going to be my next pick. But you had to pick before me. Got him. So congratulations on that one. I don't love George Pickens. I feel like Jacksonville is going to be with you have Kirk. I think he'll have some big games, but I think he's have some other games that are just duds for you.
Yeah.
I'll say the biggest thing for your team will be whether or not Kansas City goes back to old Kansas City or how they finished last year. Because I remember at the end of the year last year, I mean, Mahomes was struggling at times.
I was ready to move on from Mahomes and Kelsey this offseason. I just didn't get anything. I literally didn't get a singular offer on any of that. So,
but if they get now, so what is it? They just getting older and the offense is not as
Kelsey terrifies me. Mahomes, I'm fine to hold on to forever. I'm hoping last year was an aberration where Mahomes looked average as fuck last year, and certainly in our league. Kelsey, and it's the reason I got no offers when I put him out there. It's the end of the line, plain and simple. Kelsey is going to be the point where when he has his good weeks, it's going to be way better than anybody else has ever gotten. But I think when he has his bad weeks, we're talking outside of the top 14, probably shouldn't be a starter in our league bad because teams are taking him away and it's a little bit easier for them to do so now.
Yeah, but I think having Mahomes, Kelsey, and Christian McCaffrey will be enough to get you in the playoffs. I don't expect their offense to continue to play as poorly as it did at the end of the last season. I expect them to be better. Kind of get back to what they've been. I expect the receivers they've added there to have some big games for different guys at different times. So that's why I have you in there, even without the top-notch receiving core on your team.
And then I know you have 2 elite guys to go along with Rob, and I have those as my 2 of my top 3 guys. So let's talk about the next 2 guys. And let's start with JR. We both kind of have him as one of the last couple of teams to make it in to the playoffs. I love JR's starting lineup literally from start to finish. Flex and bench is where it gets a little interesting because we don't know what Keon Coleman is yet. Plus, he has double bits of that Buffalo offense, which we don't really know what that Buffalo offense is. But when you look at up to the flex spot, Jared Goff is a guy that I love. Jared Goff, believe it or not, was the reason I was willing to move on from Mahomes. I understand it was a 1-year rental type thing, but I think Jared Goff is every bit of capable of putting up the same numbers as Patrick Mahomes this year. But then you got Breece Hall, Rashad White, Garrett Wilson, Mike Evans, Dalton Kincaid. It's a solid starting lineup. He just needs, I don't mind his bench. He's going to need someone to step up into the flex spot. I guess one of the concerns might be, is my man just too invested in the Jets at this point as a Jets fan?
Yeah, so I really like his team. It's funny that Jared Goff was his quarterback because when I was literally doing my notes for this show, I was like, he has built the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
He has built a really good team that I just don't think is going to win a championship. Same thing with the Detroit Lions. I think they're a really good team. I don't think they're championship material, but they're really good. And that's how that was my comp for his team. I like them. They're good. He did a great job. I just don't know if he has enough to get over the hump and get the championship. So I don't have him in my top 3, but I have him as a top team.
It's an interesting point about the Lions. When I was ranking my fantasy defenses for the year, I was shocked that the Lions didn't even make my top 15 because they make these splash plays and you want to love Aiden Hutchinson, but when you look at them as a unit, you're right. They're decidedly average or below average. And then you have an offense that can put up points, but they can also just choke away some games. So that's JR. And then the forgotten man in Dan's rankings, I do want to put out that Taylor with the Bijan Robinson trade and Taylor just manning up with Bijan in the chat here. with the Bijan Robinson trade. I didn't have rankings done before that trade went down, but that brought Taylor up to number 2 on my list. The only question mark for me on Taylor's team at all is Jaden Daniels at quarterback. And if I'm gambling on a quarterback, it's a young rushing quarterback. It's you're gambling on Anthony Richardson. So I have him with Jaden Daniels. Love the running backs with Bijan and Kyron. Love the wide receivers with Kupp and Olave. Love Jake Ferguson in a 14-team league. I think he's a top 8 to 10 tight end. Alvin Kamara in my rankings is the best flex player in our league, and Taylor still has bench spots to go with that. I love everything about Taylor's team, and because I don't love Darren's team as much as everybody else, Taylor also gets to play Darren twice, so it shook out well for me. I actually have Taylor earning the bye and finishing as second. You have him sneaking into the playoffs and forgetting to rank him.
I didn't forget to rank him. I just forgot he was in the league. Just forgot he existed.
So you get a reminder every time you sign in.
I don't have him like sneaking into the playoffs. I have him as a solid team. I don't have him with Jane Daniels at quarterback. I don't love Ferguson as much as you do. I don't necessarily have him up there within my top 3. But I think he's right there with JR. He's a good team, a really good team, especially with those running backs. I don't love Kamara as much as other people do either. Maybe that's the difference in why I don't have him up there.
Oh, yeah. So when I broke down the Rams, I started off low on Kamara, and then Kamara. I one of these days I'll learn how to pronounce that name, but I started off low on him. The more I broke down the Rams and the more about what the Rams were saying this offseason, I just kept moving him up. And now they're flirting with the idea of him possibly returning kicks. And while that doesn't get him yards in our league, I could see this guy breaking a touchdown on these kick returns. I'm liking what I'm hearing. Like I said, I'm big on him specifically in PPR leagues. So
we'll see.
Yeah, obviously. So the 2 people whose names we haven't talked about yet, hilariously, it just occurred to me just now, are our 2 newest managers. And I think we both have the same number 1. So let's start with the guy who's not number 1, and that is Eric. Eric gifted Jalen Hurts from Darren in the draft and from Rob in the draft. So he brings in Jalen Hurts. He brings in Devon Achane, Isaiah Pacheco, Jalen Waddle. So obviously he's a little Dolphins heavy there. He has your boy T. Higgins. Sam Laporte is a great pick. Hopefully Amari Cooper is a good pick, but I think he still has a bench that can support that. The one knock on Eric's team, and I guess this is just my ego, is that he has to play me twice. But I'm more scared of him than he needs to be scared of me. I don't remember where you had him ranked. I know he's one of your top 3. Am I right that he's not your number 1?
He's not my number 1. If I had to rank my top 3, he'd be number 3 for me.
And that's where he is for me. I just have Taylor instead of Rob Mott's there for you. So
he great team. I mean, absolutely great if everything plays out. I don't love his bench. Achane got hurt 3 times last year.
Yes, he did.
That makes me nervous to have.
I'm going to look it up right now, but I thought I read once all of his points came in like 4 games.
I mean, that's true. He had a couple big games. He had some other games that were okay, but like, I don't love his bench. Jermaine Burton is only going to be valuable if T. Higgins gets hurt. And I mean, so you have him as a backup, sure, but even then, I don't know the Bengals are going to put him in. The Bengals are not thrilled with where Burton is at right now. Let's just be honest.
I think he got a steal on Rashee Rice. I think Rashee Rice is going to end up being that number 1 in Kansas City. I don't think he's going to get suspended. So I think he's going to be able to slide Rashee Rice into his flex. I have T. Higgins ahead of Amari Cooper. All the reports, Dan, for your Bengals is that this could be a career year for the T. Higgins, Joe Burrow connection.
Yeah, I mean, they've all said he looked great, but I mean, what are they going to say? He looked terrible. Everybody looks great in training camp and preseason. That's just the way it is for the most part. My biggest thing for Eric is his team could be so much better, in my opinion, if he, instead of drafting 2 quarterbacks to start the draft, he went
a lot of weirdness in the draft this year.
Hurts than Kyler Murray. I think he could have went Brandon Ayuk at that point and added more depth, or gotten another running back and added more depth, versus having a second quarterback.
It's a really good point. I forgot he did that, honestly. I was so thrown off my equilibrium by Greg's draft that I forgot that there was another person who took a second quarterback far too early. I think there was one point in the 7th round. And for those who aren't in our league, we have 3 keepers. So it's technically the 10th round, which is still too early for what I'm about to say. There was one point in the 7th round where in our 14 team league, 18 or 19 quarterbacks had gone already. And that's just bonkers to me. Just bananas. So it really threw me off. Any final thoughts on Eric's team before we talk about new Rob P?
I mean, it's a great team. He did a good job. Loved where he got Sam Laporta. I think that's a steal. No, I love it. I think he's great. This should have a good year.
Yeah, weird year. Let me ask you something.
Well, hopefully for all the bad not karma, but feelings he had for what he had to deal with last year, taking over a team with no draft picks. Hopefully it's more of a fun year for him and he gets to enjoy it.
I think he's going to have a lot of fun this year. Let's talk about tight ends for a second, because it almost made me feel silly keeping Travis Kelce, seeing Andrews, Laporta, Kincaid, Pitts, even McBride. None of these guys were kept, right? They were all in the draft. McBride might have been kept. I don't remember who Stevie kept.
No.
He kept Andrews, Adams, and Barkley. So all these guys in the draft. Dan, are we at a point now where tight ends are so closely grouped that not even Travis Kelce is worth being kept? Because if I had a better keeper, the thought might have crossed my mind. I just didn't have a better keeper.
So here's the thing. If it was Travis Kelce 3 years or more ago, it's absolutely you keep him.
Yeah.
But I think we're approaching the point with his age that there may be better options out there. Because let me ask you this. If I offered you a trade right now of Sam Laporta and another keeper level player for Travis Kelce, would you take that trade?
Probably take Laporta straight up.
That's my point.
Yeah. I actually tried to hustle him where I offered him Kelce for Laporta and a pick last year. And I don't even know if he responded. I think I ended up just pulling the trade back. But yeah,
people respond to trades. Come on.
Yeah.
There's more frustrating than not even responding to a trade.
No, I feel like to bring up the ghost of our dearly departed friend, Matt Herzog, I feel like I'm about to LaDainian Tomlinson this thing. With Travis Kelce, where I might not get his.
He's gonna be so mad when he watches this and hears his name.
Yeah, exactly. He's gonna keep my name out of your mouth. But I won't get as bitter as he did about LaDainian Tomlinson. But it's gotten to the point where I've probably outkept Travis Kelce at his value. But let's stop talking about my team. We've done enough of that. Dan, am I correct? Is Rob P your best team on your rankings? Because he was by far the best team in my rankings. He is the only team that I gave double-digit wins. I think Rob P is about to have a great fucking season this year.
He is number one in my rankings, absolutely. That being said, I think he could have actually done better. I mean, there were some picks in there I didn't necessarily love. But his team, the strength, the depth, I think some guys fell to him perfectly. But I mean, I think he messed up taking Herbert where he did. He fell
victim to having all of those picks, because he just started, instead of just drafting best player available, he started like getting weird with his picks. And to be fair, Rob, it was wonderful meeting you for the first time. He was very open about he was going to do some wild shit. He even let Stevie's kid Chase make picks for him. Rob P got wild at the draft. And I like Rob P. Let me be very clear. I'm so glad that he got invited to the league. Very cool guy. I enjoyed having him at the draft. Super great entertainment value.
The only productive thing Phil's done is like 6 years
bring Rob P in.
Bring Rob in.
My one request, Rob P, is if Phil quits, I don't think he's going to, but if he does, don't quit with him. We've had people do that. Don't do that. We want you. You belong here. You fit in well. We love having you in the league. Don't go anywhere. Dan, Lamar Jackson at quarterback, I think with the rushing capability, I think we've seen a roller coaster career for Lamar Jackson. I think we are on an upturn with what they're trying to do in Baltimore. I think it's going to be a great year for him. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. You said you don't like that he took Najee. I don't remember the draft as well as you clearly do. But you said you would have went someone else there?
I just don't love Najee, period.
Okay.
I don't see a reason to put him on a team. Going back to you, Lamar Jackson real quick. Baltimore is having some offensive line struggles. I'm interested to see how that affects Lamar Jackson running and throwing and just his overall health. but you could absolutely be right. So for Najee, other running backs that were available, Zamir White, both the Bengals running backs I would have taken over him.
What?
I would have Zach Moss than Najee Harris.
Oh,
Absolutely.
not even close. Najee's a top 20 running back for me this season. With Jalen Warren hurt already, I'm not making that. You might have been able to convince me on Zamir White with the volume we saw in the last 4 games last season. The Bengals running backs, I have nowhere near him.
Well, maybe I'm just a hater, but I don't. I'm not a Najee fan. I'm not a Najee fan. Yeah.
Moving on to wide receiver, I said earlier that no team could compete with Horvath. The only other team I gave a perfect score at wide receiver, and this might be early for Marvin Harrison Jr., but Rob has A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr. I gave him a perfect score at wide receiver. Other than Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, I don't know that there's a better group that you'll see on a singular fantasy team.
No, I agree. I love his team. You know, you have Mark Andrews in there. He has a lot of options for flex. He has depth. It was a great draft. He did a great job. That's why he's in my top 3.
Let's go ahead and I want to have you talk about Malik Neighbors. You watch more college football than I do. I had heard nothing but positive things about Malik Neighbors coming into the NFL. Literally that he would have been the first pick in any draft that didn't have Marvin Harrison in it. Literally that Marvin Harrison is an old school wide receiver and Malik Neighbors is going to be more of the new school, the Justin Jefferson, the Jamar Chase, the things that we want to see in the NFL right now. And then he goes to the Giants and everybody starts hating, myself included. Is the Giants situation overblown for Malik Neighbors, or could this be a guy who steps in and changes our league in a way where Rob P is starting 3 studs at wide receiver and still has decent running backs?
So I think he's going to start 3 studs at receiver just because he has so much depth on his team, even if Malik Neighbors fails. But going back to your original question, Neighbors. So here's the thing. I like him. I think he's actually going to be really good. I think people hate Daniel Jones, some Danny Dimes, more than what they should. And I think that causes them to leave a bad taste in their mouth with Neighbors. I actually think Danny Dimes is going to be better this year. I think the Giants overall are going to be better this year. And I think Neighbors will be fine. I don't think that he's going to go out and have if you're going out and your expectation is to him to have a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase, a Puka Nacua kind of year, you're going to be disappointed.
I
think he'll be fine. I think he'll.
No, keep going.
I think he'll have a good year. I think he's going to be a fine pro. I just don't think you can go out and expect that from rookie receivers every year. And if the assumption is that Marvin Harrison is already going to do that, the fact of getting 2 in 1 year that good, the odds are so small.
Yes,
not to mention the fact there are so many good other receivers in this draft, and there are rookies that have potential to be really good. It's just the odds aren't in favor of that happening.
I just wanted to address Lee real quick. These were the new guys that we had already gotten in over you last year when everybody was fighting for you and I screwed you over. So it's not like we brought more new guys in. These are last year's new guys who picked up complete dumpster fire of teams and have turned them around in the greatest of ways. So Dan, obviously you have an elite 3. Are you calling Rob P your champion right now? I am. The way things shook out, I think he can run away with this thing.
I'm hoping for a Rob versus Rob championship.
Ooh.
I think that would be fun.
And that was the other thing I wanted to point out. Whereas I have Rob as a fringe team, you have Rob Motts as a top 3 team this year.
Yes. I think that'd be fun. Lee, you are the next person in this league. I could see some people quitting at the end of this year. So hang in there.
We're going to string you along for 17 more weeks. Dan, we did not talk about this before the show. And I'll be honest, I don't have a pick right now either. So I'm going to go in here and look. I think last year it's easy to probably look at Darren's team and call Jalen Hurts or Tyreek Hill the league MVP. Do you have a player this year that you think is going to be so heads and tails better than his competition that we're going to be looking at him and say, he's the reason his team is where it is? For me, I'll go first. I'm going to stick with Rob P's team, and I think it's Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm hoping he can get over this hamstring injury, which is always rough with soft tissue injuries for running backs. But I think Jahmyr Gibbs and his role with the Detroit Lions as a pass catcher and still a part of close to a 50-50 back split on a team that still does not have a proven wide receiver too. I think he could step up and change the game this year. Jahmyr Gibbs in my rankings ranks out to my RB4 behind the 3 elite guys, but the elite guys we expected from, I'm calling Breece, Bijan, and CMC the elite guys. If Gibbs is the RB4 and can stay in a class with those 3, I think we're going to look back at the season and say that he's the reason Rob P is our champion.
So there are 3 players that jump off my when you as you said, there are 3 players that jumped into my head that I think could be league MVP, determining the championship level players that have not gotten to that point before in our league. I think Garrett Wilson having Aaron Rodgers there could absolutely bump him into that top-notch receiver role. Not that he hasn't been great already, but he's never played with anybody close to that level. And we know what Aaron Rodgers has done with other receivers in the past. Yeah. And if that's the case, that could bump JR right up into that 100% tier. CJ Stroud, if he takes that
next step. You and I already talked about that a lot. Yep.
And I think he could continue to further Rob. And you mentioned earlier, I think this is the best Joe Burrow has looked. I think he could have his best year. And I think if that's the case, if Joe Burrow does that, I could see myself maybe getting into the playoffs then.
But Dan with an elite quarterback would be something the league hasn't seen in a very long time with a healthy elite correct starting quarterback. That would certainly be a change of luck for you there.
Yeah, it is.
It's been a rough one. So just to recap, as we get out of here, we basically agreed on 5 of 6 playoff teams. We both have Rob P, Taylor, Eric, myself, and JR. I have Metzger in. Metzger has Motts in. And I have Motts as the first guy out. So we are very similar. And now it's up to you guys to prove us wrong. Horvath, it's going to be a rough season for you. I know you watch this show with your kids, so I'm going to be as gentle with you this entire season. But my God, those running backs, man, I am going to be laying into you. I love you, buddy. It's going to be a blast. Dan, any parting words for our friends?
I love you guys. I'm glad football season is here. Yeah. Hopefully it's a fun one for everyone. I think this is going to be a fun year. I think other than those bottom 3, I think there's a lot of teams going to have a lot of fun this year. And I'm going to see what kind of trades happen with so many teams being, I think, pretty strong to start the year.
Yeah, and I would love to see everybody get under the roster limit in the next 4 days. Maybe get some trades going there. And I say it's a bottom 1, not a bottom 3. Bottom Horvath is what I'm calling.
Are you going to change it from the old days of the Mendez to the Horvath?
No. He doesn't deserve that. He was in the championship last year. No. Just this season, I'm not loving it. I think all I ask, don't quit like Brian did when he was in the same situation. Stick with us, Horvath. All right, guys, have a good night. We'll be back next weekend. We are not going to have a set day and time because we're playing around the Massillon games and hockey and all that fun stuff. But we'll be back next weekend to break down week 1, obviously before Sunday. And then kickoff is this upcoming Thursday. So we'll know a little bit. You guys have a great night. We'll see you next week.